submitted for your approval. A fan-based show who encompasses the multi-twined multiverse of superheroes, villains, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, and action comedy. All whose genesis stems from the printed page of the comic book. At the logo streaming towards your head, you've just entered into Comics, Cons, and Beyond. Welcome back to Comics, Cons, and Beyond, all you comic book fans, the show that discusses all the intertwining multiverses that comes from the comic book, hence the name. With us as usual, we have Ben, we have Bob, we have Adam, and I am your esteemed host, Lawrence. Fans just like you, and we're going to discuss a plethora of things as we go. Tonight, though, we are going to be discussing a few things, starting off with... Who wants to start us off on that discussion?
I can go with that. A little bit of the new rebirth of DC. Their step into kind of starting over their new comic books, gentlemen. Any opinions on that one?
I really do like that concept because I myself had never really kept up with DC, and now I have opportunity to start off from scratch and also own everything from scratch in this new reboot of it. So that's a real selling point for me because I didn't want to catch into DC. Like, never really a big fan except for a few excerpts like specialty Batman issues. But nothing really I've ever kept up with DC as well, especially the Justice League. That's what's really exciting for me for this one. I'm excited to get into a whole new universe as it reboots and starts and gets to a whole new deep, what's the word, mythos?
Yeah.
But in the fan chat rooms, there's definitely been a lot of mixed reviews about the reboot because they're taking too many creative licenses, and it's not necessarily a retelling. It seems to be convoluted. Your thoughts?
I like what they're doing with DC Rebirth, and that's pretty much they're taking the next chapter in what the New 52 was, and you know, I think if anyone's read the actual first issue of Rebirth, they would have seen that they introduced, well, they didn't actually introduce, but they gave the Easter egg that it was Dr. Manhattan, which if you know, I'm speaking for everyone, I think we can all agree that Watchmen was probably one of the best comics ever made.
Yes.
Along with, in my opinion, one of the best films ever made as well in terms of the comic, you know,
To movie adaptation.
Exactly.
Big time. Oh yeah.
So, you know, just with them having the Watchmen now associated with the DC universe and not just a multiple, you know, multiple reality. I think it's great. I think it's great. And then along with that, you know, they're rebooting, not rebooting, but they're redoing the issues with Batman, Green Lantern, pretty much, you know, your main DC ensemble. And as Adam said, you get to kind of start from a spot where if you're an old fan, you can still pick up from you know, Flashpoint and the end of the New 52. And then if you're a new fan, you're not completely lost. You can still follow along.
Yeah,
very cool.
This is one of the things that definitely excites me is, you know, obviously you mentioned the Watchmen is going to be something that, I mean, it's going to sell itself. It's definitely going to be something interesting. Not too big of a fan of, obviously, the whole concept of people continuing but kind of starting a reboot, so the story kind of continues. But I mean, it's definitely going to be a good step, I think, at least comic book wise for DC, because I mean, God only knows beyond movies here that they definitely need something that's going to liven up the fans.
Yeah. What do you think, and I want everybody to chime in on this, what do you think was the mindset or the reasoning that both major publishers felt like they had to do these reboots again, because they've done it several times over the past 20 years. What do you think kind of spurred that on this time?
Generation of new fans that are young and seeing the films.
Absolutely.
Easily, yeah. And, you know, being able to build your own brand all over again for a whole new base. Because that's the thing, one thing I love about comic books in general is that they grew up with us. A lot of the subject matter became more and more realistic, dark, or just more controversial. And so now by having a whole new generation start off, because I'm sorry, like some of the subject matters of today don't really apply to just say like 20 years ago. They can include more of that, especially in these new respawns where you have all these fans with something they can relate to easily.
It's definitely something that they have to focus on. I mean, when it comes to these new comic books coming out, stuff like that, you mean, obviously they have to kind of keep it integral to the fans that are already out there ourselves. But it's got to be a good stagger between, you know, making sure it's not just a funny in the New York Times or something that kind of, you know, is too in-depth that people can't follow. So I think that every once in a while it's definitely a good idea to reboot it, as long as it doesn't kind of get to that point where it's like another Spider-Man film or anything. So we're just like, how many times can we reboot this before?
Let Tom Holland be the last one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just kind of getting to the point where, you know, we need some kind of cohesion with some of these stories, but we also need to make sure that those fans who go out and see Black Panther for the first time, or, you know, any of these new DC films that are coming out, have something to go out and want to buy these comic books for, and I think that's what DC's trying to pull off here.
I think it got to a certain point in the comic universe where things just got way too convoluted. You know, you had issue 700 of Batman, and along with that you had the issue 600 of Justice League, and you know, there was nothing that was like actually giving you a main storyline. You're wondering like, wait, when did this happen? When is this timeline going on within the whole universe? And I think the writers and the artists actually got confused themselves, and they didn't know what to do with it. So I had to amend them by restart, kind of doing a X-Men Days of Future Past, and saying that this stuff didn't not happen, but we're making it so that it's being manipulated by Dr. Manhattan. And then same with the Marvel Universe. Instead of just rebooting it and acting like nothing ever happened, you have the whole Secret Wars going on, and the finale, the climax of that ended up bringing you know, what we have now. Obviously, DC, in my opinion, is winning over Marvel's, you know, whatever you want to call it, reboot. But, you know, both of them are doing it the right way, in my opinion.
It's also, let's just say, also about the canon and what fans consider canon to the original storyline. With all these different side stories, it might be a good reason to do a multiverse theory or just clash them all together, and therefore, no more arguments, no more anger.
Well, I mean, you can definitely see when it comes to some of these new comic books coming out that it's not necessarily that the history isn't there, per se. It's more of, okay, what can we do from this point to kind of liven up what we've seen with these characters? Obviously, we know that Green Lantern is still in his own comic book, but he's also kind of he's a little bit more aged, he's a little bit more experienced, and we see that with Batman as well, that knowing he's, you know, coming back from that traumatic experience that he had with the Joker in the previous comic books, and he's stepped back out as, you know, a brand new Batman. It's good because it's still there, the storyline's still there, and it still holds true. So the history between the villains and the story will wind up kind of snowballing in, but it's coming from a point, and Batman's notorious for it when it comes to storylines, is when he's fighting or trying to solve something, it's always a standalone. So you could probably buy a trade paperback, 12 issues, and get a solid story out of it every single time.
And that's how I like to do it. I like to get them in the compilations for the graphic novels, because for me, it's hard every week waiting for it to come out and then getting that next one, I'd rather just sit there, one sitting, and just power through and go, yeah! I mean, it's great when you get to the end that way, because you're so engrossed, and just the time goes by like that, because you're so involved with the story. And again, the artwork, I know the artists, the graphic artists change from, you know, generation to generation, or storyline. But, you know, again, at least the character build-up and the storytelling itself is engaging.
What do you guys think was a better launch off? New 52 or Rebirth?
Hands down, it has to be New 52.
You think New 52?
I love New 52. I mean, I'm biased, obviously, because, you know, Greg Capullo and that whole Batman was the best art that I've seen when it comes down to it. I love Greg Capullo's art. I can't get around it. And, I mean, I'm totally biased. I'm not going to say that. But, I mean, it goes beyond that. I mean, Green Lantern was fun for me. I'm a big Red Lantern fan, so that's, I mean, it's corny, but I mean, so is Larfleeze. You know, what can you do about it? But it was fun, and I get it. You know, after a certain point, it becomes so difficult to, you know, you've got Lara Flees, you've got the Red Lantern, Guy Gardner's out there now doing that. You've got, you know, Batman. You've got Robin. You've got Batman and Robin. You've got Detective Comics. It's really hard to get that much. And then because, you know, follow this storyline, if you want to see what happens next, you really need to bring it home. And if you want to get people involved halfway through, you know, 10 years or whatever it is that they want up spending doing these comic books, you can't start reading at that point. You know, every once in a while you do need a reboot because you need fans to come back. And we've done this, Ben. I mean, we've read comic books and we get to the point where like we just, you know,
It's too monotonous.
we're 25 issues in and we're like, I just can't read this anymore. It's just garbage. And
Well, the storytellers peter out, or they're changing the storytellers, and they can't live up to what was previously done. Now, I mean, both of the major publishers have been doing this, but now just, you know, calling it the Rebirth or the New 52. Every generation that has come into the comic books that were influenced by the comics prior to that always spoke to that generation at that time. But to me, they still kept, as Jeremy pointed out, canon. So it was kind of like their interpretation, but still staying true to the core essence of the characters and storylines.
And that's where I think that's why they did the reboot. I think that's why they do reboots in general. I think it's because at a certain point you have these writers who their storylines wind up creating other storylines and they lose their spark. You can't keep an artist. We're all artists here. You can't do the same thing over and over and over again and expect that you're going to have that same fire and drive that you had when you initially wanted to do it. I mean, if someone keeps breathing down your neck to print out an issue every single week or whatever it is, or, you know, you just lose it. And I think what the Rebirth does, and obviously we know that different artists are taking over, is it gives these new people as well as older people a chance to
move to other projects.
I mean, to have that fire and that spark.
Something that's going to interest them and give them a breather, maybe step back and take a fresh look at it when hopefully maybe they do come back to it, because again, that's what they loved at that time.
Yeah, I'm sure, like for example, Greg left, but I'm sure he'll wind up doing that because he's done it before.
Yeah, he's just tired of doing it for 6 years.
Tired of doing it.
Let's do some final thoughts on this subject before we move on.
Okay.
Ben, please go ahead and start off.
I was just gonna say that pretty much on that topic, I think that the reason why they do need to do the shit, you lost me. Fucked up my mojo, man.
Sorry.
Damn it.
I'll give you mojo.
Kinky.
Bob?
Overall, I'd say I'm pretty excited for it. You know, I've been a Batman fan up to this point. I wound up burning through them all in the last year of the New 52, and it's phenomenal. Red Hood's got me excited. I mean, it's my favorite DC thing, so I'm not going to stop reading it. Batman is, at this point, I'm too far in. If anybody's ever read Batman,
Like, I can't turn back.
You can't turn back. And I'm kind of, there's a certain point where, in the recent issue, I think the issue before this last one that came out, if you read it from the previous issue before that, you kind of didn't know what was going on. That's got me a little bit worried, but I mean, overall, this is something that needed to be done. We need to see new artists. We need to see what they're capable of, because Greg Bull is great. All these other people are great. Zack Snyder, all these people, but we also get tired of reading it, and we know what stories, and we can see in the work that they're providing that it's just lacking that first issue New 52. So they need new projects. So look forward to it.
Adam?
I'm just excited to start delving into the universe, whether it be a new one or an old one, but especially this new one, to begin to understand those characters that I honestly didn't give it any credit to, or any interest to, I should say. So for me, it's like my Batman stories are always the one-shots and the one-offs. Same for Superman, and actually almost everyone in the entire Justice League always one-offs. Never the entire one. So I'm excited to actually get all of that into a huge brick on my bookshelf to complete who I am.
Fair enough.
Don't
Ben?
judge me.
I kind of agree with Bob on that, where it's hard to pick up a comic, and I think that's the reason why they've been doing all these reboots. Is it's hard to pick up a comic at issue 400 and get into it. Quick story: my girlfriend went to a comic shop because she knows I like Batman, and she picked me up 4 comics, and they're great comics, but it's issue 454, part 2 of 2, issue 300, part 4 of 4 or 5, and you want to read them, you want to be like, oh, babe,
Yeah.
and it was an amazing gift, but it's just like, how the hell am I supposed to get in this unless I go back to the comic shop and buy issue 1, 2, 3, 4? And these are comics that came out back in the 80s, 90s, 2000s. How the hell am I going to even find these now? I'm going to have to buy them online.
If you're a lover of it, there's so much history back there. It'll take a day and an age, but if you're interested in what we're talking about here and want to go back into the history of it, go to your favorite comic book store, keep alive a slice of Americana with the printed comic book page, but there's also an incredible amount of backdated comics online. Start off with your favorite character and just work your way on up, and trust me, you will not be disappointed.
You won't even stop.
Yeah, you won't even stop. But it's good stuff, it really is. And these characters really speak to each generation, and it keeps the morals and the virtues of that generation propelling forward into very fantastic character building and storylines. Until next time, this is Comics, Cons, and Beyond. We're glad that you watched. Like us, hit that like button on the bottom of this video, tell friends, and then come back for more, because we'll be here.
We have nowhere else to go.
We don't, we really don't.